we have a problem because with plagiarism, because it has those things. It's not flattery. You know, these people try to get away with something. They don't really understand what they took, and you know, they don't think they're going to be caught. Okay, so and they don't have the skills to develop their own things. These are the problems with plagiarism. Okay, so let me put this up here. Okay, so what happened? Well, you know, a fellow put a little thread in our Facebook page. We have a page called Rational Science, and he put this article there, and I looked at it and found out that there was this fellow. His name is Micky Callahan, and he was there for a long time. You know, I never knew much about him. Just whenever he came in there and discussed physics, I would talk to him, usually confront him because he had weird ideas. Okay? And so people come in there and we discuss physics because that's what I'm interested in. Okay? And so this fellow came in there, and I wasn't aware that for a couple years he had been listening and reading and then taking all that material and making his own website. And he took a lot of that material and claimed it as his, essentially. And that's what I'm going to go over now, okay? And so he does say in there, he does admit, he says, you weren't supposed to see this. And the only reason I got to see it is because there's this site that he has known as Demystifying Science in Facebook. And some of the members in our group also belong to that group. And one of these members, he took this article and put it in our group, and that's the only reason I found out about this fellow. Otherwise, you know, I wouldn't have known about him or what he was doing out there. Had no idea he existed other than his participation in our group. Okay? So he comes in there, he puts that article. I started researching. I said, well, who is this fellow? You know, because I started looking at some of his stuff and found out they resembled very much like stuff that I have out there. Okay? And so I looked this guy up and find out that he's published an article. He's published several articles in Business Insider. And this is what they say. This gives you an overall picture of what this guy is up to. Him and this lady. We're a couple who was furloughed from our jobs, so we're using the time in self-isolation to turn our passion project into a viable business. Here's how we're making it happen. Oh, okay. And the lady, Anastasia Bendebury, and the fellas, Michael Shilo Delay. They go by those monikers, those also known as. She's going to be Nasty and he's going to be Shilo. Okay, we have Nasty and Shilo, Nasty Shilo. Well, if he's Shilo, I mean, I think his grandfather must have been in the Civil War or something. Well, if he's Shilo, I'm Bull Run. Okay, he's going to come up against Manassas Junction. That's what's going to happen here. And they say that together they run the Demystifying Science site. Okay, what is this all about? It says, we put our heads together and came up with strategies for getting published and getting paid. It's about money. It worked. In the first month, 17,000 people read our work. And they published that in April 16, 2020, almost a year to the day today. Okay, so they publish their stuff, which is good. I like young people to go out there and publish stuff, no problem. But as you can see, they publish girly stuff, you know, testimonials, that sort of thing. And, you know, a lot of people buy that. Most people buy that. In fact, they're not into science. You know, people out there, they want to read testimonials, how to make money and that sort of thing. And that's what these people publish. Okay, fine. No problem. I congratulate them. Wait on the other side. Give me a second here. Oh, sometimes falls on the other side of the wall here with my program. And so you look them up and you find this Demystifying Science in Facebook. Okay, about this group history says they were created in 2017, and they had their original name apparently was the Art of Rational Science, which is what we had. We didn't call it the Art of Rational Science. We called it, I think, Rational Scientific Method. Maybe at some point we called it Rational Science. Then they changed the name to the Art of Explanation, and finally they left it as Demystifying Science. Okay? So that was more or less the history of the group. It's got 5,000 followers. Comparison to our group, we have like 80 or 90 followers. We have very few. This fellow and this lady, they have a lot, okay? Or a lot more than us, you know. Okay, what concerned me when I looked up this fellow, I looked at his website, their website, I guess they're a couple and they work together, and this is what offended me from the start. This offended me tremendously. They invoke people who are mathematical physicists. So here I'm going to look at their website. I'm going to find a lot of my stuff. I don't see my name anywhere. And instead, I see references to people in mathematical physics, which they apparently, look up to. And here's the first one. His name was David Lindley, or is David Lindley. And who's this fellow? Well, this fellow is a censor. That's what his job was all his life. What he did was he worked for some of these magazines, these journals, and what he did all his life was censor people. And this guy, he claims that, it's the end of physics. This was an article written in, I think, the New York Times. And what does he talk about? Well, he talks about verifying by experiment, talking about such theories as Big Bang are plausible. Okay, he says that mathematics is the language of physics. He believes in the standard model. Why? Because it's based on experiments. And he says that the standard model explains what has been revealed by experiment. Absolutely not. Mathematical physics in its entirety doesn't explain anything. All they have are descriptions. In fact, they consider explanations outside the bounds of science. They consider that philosophy. And so when you try to publish something in one of these science magazines that this fellow ran, he was the director or editor-in-chief or something, they censor you. They say, look, we don't want to hear that quantum is irrational. We know it's irrational. We don't understand it. Or like Richard Feynman said, no one understands quantum mechanics. And so they don't care about physical interpretations. They don't consider that science. They consider that philosophy. And so you can't publish a different version of how this universe works, especially at the micro level, in the case of quantum, macro level, in the case of relativity. You can't publish anything along those lines. They will only allow you to publish equations. And so when you go to these so-called science literature, you'll never find a picture. What you'll find is equations. So you won't find mechanisms of how this universe works. You won't find a mechanism for gravity. You won't find a mechanism for light. You won't find a mechanism for magnetism or electricity. You won't find a mechanism for any of that stuff. Why? Because all they want to see is equations, descriptions, quantitative descriptions. And so, yeah, it's impossible to publish something in one of those magazines. If you don't publish there, the blogs won't read it, won't translate it for the masses, and nobody hears about your theory. So it's a way of doing shadow banning. You can talk all you like as long as you talk to the ocean, to the wall, but they're not going to allow the public to listen to you. And that's the issue. Okay, so this guy's just a censor. He's part of the establishment. And these people put him in fact, interviewed him in one of their podcasts. Okay, and they also glorify this lady, which I talked about a couple weeks ago. Her name is Sabine Hossenfelder. She works here a couple miles north of where I live. And she defected, they say, from the mathematical physics camp. Absolutely not. She's a mathematical physicist, 150%. She does, what does she do? She does, dark angels, dark spirits. She does dark matter and dark energy. That's what she works on. That's what her group does. And what is dark energy? Well, dark energy is, you have this Big Bang explosion, so you have to believe in Big Bang to begin with if you're going to do this kind of stuff. They're saying that there was this explosion, everything's running away from ground zero. And they say, well, why doesn't gravity pull it back in? And they say, well, it's this dark energy, these dark angels that are pushing everything outwards. And that's what she studies. She's looking for dark energy and dark matter. So, no, she hasn't abandoned mathematical physics at all. Okay, so let's make that clear. And I made that clear, and you look up the video, I have a video on her. Okay, exposes the confusion of Mathphyz in her book, Lost in Math. Well, again, it's like this other guy, Lindley, they say, we talk against math, against these mathematicians. They talk against them, and then they immediately propose the same thing. They propose, what do they propose? They propose quantum mechanics and general relativity. So we're back to square one. They're just going around in circles saying, we criticize them to sell books, and then they come back and say, but we do mathematical physics as well. So I don't know what they're criticizing. No, these people are completely within the camp of mathematical physics, which is total irrationality, irrational explanations, 150% of it. And they say that she alleges particles are measurements. Well, yeah, but she deals with particles because to this day, after 10,000 years, no one has invented anything other than particles except me. I have come up with something different than particles. I'm the only person. on planet Earth. Okay, so let's get that straight. Okay, and so she still believes in particles and vouches for QM, for quantum mechanics. And her group, again, researches dark matter and dark energy. And she said, this is a statement from hers, okay? It says, dark energy and dark matter are entirely normal and perfectly scientific hypotheses. No, they're not, because like Mr. Feynman said, they don't know what energy is to begin with. And energy is a concept, and you can't say that a concept pushes against gravity, which is another concept. You need to identify what the physical mediators are if you're going to talk about what's pushing that out and what's pulling that in. Okay? If you're going to talk about gravity, you got to identify the physical mediators that pull on things, because that's what they're saying. It's push against pull, and the pull is known as gravity, and the push is known as dark energy. And whenever you push a box, you have to use your hands or something, maybe a horse or some mediator, some physical mediator. Whenever you pull on a donkey, you got to have a mediator, physical mediator. And what these people don't have is physical mediators. Why? Because they're mathematicians. They are not physicists. So that mathematical physicist thing, the physicist is too much. It's false advertising. That's what it amounts to. Okay, and in their site, these demystifiers, okay, they also mention this fellow, Mach, Ernst Mach. And they put a question there and said, what causes inertia? Okay, and it says, Mach discovered the explanation to inertia. Well, did he? I mean, what's the explanation? In other words, what's the physical interpretation? For a physical interpretation, you need objects. And, Mach was not smart enough to figure out what objects were doing the pulling. And the issue is that Mach's principle says that, all the stars are essentially pulling on you. Something discovered really by Newton, because you have Newton's bucket, where you twirl a bucket that's hanging from a little rope, and if you twirl it with heavy water, right, and the water will go up the sides. And so the question is, what's pulling on that water? And so Newton himself realized that's something outside of the Earth. You're pulling against something. Like when a skater rotates, why do their arms go outwards? Well, because you're being pulled by the stars. How can the stars pull on you if they're so far away? Well, maybe you're connected, physically connected to the stars. Maybe that's the answer. And of course, Ernst Mach had a notion and intuition that we were pulling against the stars, but he says, I don't see anything between my fingers and the stars. And that goes to this observation issue that we've been discussing lately. Yeah, you cannot observe that which is invisible and intangible. You can't run an experiment to elucidate what is invisible and intangible. The only way to approach that is through thinking. You do a thought experiment. You visualize and try to imagine how Mother Nature could be doing this with physical objects that are intangible and invisible. That's how you do it. So Mach never discovered that. In fact, you look at the Wikipedia and it has this note in there about Mach. He just said it like, in passing. It's not like he wrote a paper on it or anything. He says, one of the best known of Mach's ideas is the so-called Mach principle concerning the physical origin of inertia. This was never written down by Mach. He never wrote this down, but was given a graphic verbal form attributed to Philip Frank, to Mach himself, as, when the subway jerks, it's the fixed stars that throw you down. There you have the synthesis of Mach's principle. And the guy who made Mach famous on this issue was Einstein, because he used the same notion. He says, we're being pulled by the stars, and then he came up with space-time and all this other stuff that all the mathematicians in those days were discussing in their meetings and so on. And so they continue in their site, in Demystifying Science, they say, the only explanation for gravity is that all atoms are pulling on you. Okay, but see, they didn't attribute that to me. They attributed it to Mach. They say he came up with the explanation. Now, the explanation is when you put a physical object in there, when you have interconnectedness. And until you have physical interconnectedness, you cannot talk about pull of any kind. Okay, so it's interesting that these folks gave credit to Hassenfelder and to Lindley and to Mach, and probably to other people in their site, but they didn't mention me at all. Big omission. Okay, so I go to Shilo's page that struck me, because he says that you need objects to do physics, and they have to be objects that exist, because physics apparently has something to do with objects and with existence. And so they go in there and they have a page where they analyze these two words, okay, and this is what they say, okay. Says, what does it mean for something to exist in physics? Well, that's a subject right down my alley. So the word exist is central to many, if not all, scientific discussions, yet is almost never defined unambiguously and then utilized in such a consistent fashion. I'm going to make the case. He's going to make the case. I see. Yeah, thank God someone did, okay? That this confusion is central to the apparent stagnation of theoretical physics, and hence at the heart of modern scientific conversation's failure to establish a unified physical picture of our universe. All words and hence all ideas, regardless of the language, can be divided into one of two categories, object and concept. Now, where could he have gotten that? And says, an existing object is a body with location. And what is that body? That is something with a shape. Okay, so, I heard of all this before. I wonder where he got all this, okay? And it says, a concept, on the other hand, is merely a relationship between what? One existing object and another, or an additional concept. Wonder where he got the notion of concept. Why would he talk about concept in the context of this conversation, okay? And physics, on the other hand, necessarily begins with existing objects. We always start with such an object in physics because it is the science that principally deals with the dynamics of existing bodies. In order for that object to exist, it has to also have location. And defines that as a set of static distances to all other objects in the scene. Without a location, an object cannot be said to exist. Man, I could swear I heard that somewhere. Where did I hear of that before? And yeah, good old Micky Callahan, which is the other name for Shilo here, he was in our group for a long time, 2 or 3 years. I don't know how long he was in there, but I know he's been there for a long time because he would come in there, debate, and talk physics, but I didn't know what he was doing in secret back there, okay? And so let's see where he got this stuff. Let's see if this rings a bell. This is in my site, youstupidrelativist.com. It says, summary of principles, foundations, and definitions of science and physics. It says, physics is first and foremost the study of objects. You cannot do physics without an object. An object is that which has shape, and space is that which doesn't. A concept is a word that embodies or invokes 2 or more objects. A concept is a relation between objects. Thus, the definition of the word object precedes the definition of the word concept. We refer to the space separating the surfaces of any 2 objects as distance. The distance of physics is not the same as the distance traveled of mathematics. Something that Shilo did not understand, obviously, because you got to spend 2 years on the word distance, and he didn't even cover that. He just copied and pasted, Location consists of the set of distances from one object to the remaining ones in the system. And physics only studies objects that exist. Physics is the science of existence. Exist is a word circumscribed to objects. Okay? So, looks like Mr. Shilo and Miss Nasty, they just went to my site, or maybe to the Facebook area, I don't know, and got all this stuff from there. And they just reworded it a little bit and put it in there because they covered the word exist, object, location, distance, which this guy, because he copied, pasted, didn't realize it was an important word to analyze in much more detail than what he did. He says, oh, distance, you know what distance is. Yeah, okay. And he just copied and pasted it. And so, yeah, you need to define these words, and also the word concept for that matter. So, all these words, they were taken out of my site. And in that page, he did not give me credit at all. Okay? Completely without credit. He just took it and put it in his site. And that's a very important part because this is what I always say. And I keep saying it over and over again. And apparently this fellow never listened. Okay? The definition of the word object destroys all religion. My most important contribution to science, and of which I'm most proud of, was not the rope hypothesis. It was the definition of the word object and realizing that you can't do physics without it. See, we have Euclid, and he defined a figure, essentially an object, because it's a synonym of the word object, as not that which has shape. He says that which has boundary. And then when you look at boundary, you say, well, that's which surrounds a shape. So he was trying to define the word shape. He couldn't get around that, so he just put those 2 statement in there. But they were close enough. I mean, to say, an object is that which has shape, an object is that which has a boundary. He was on the right track. The problem with Euclid is, 2 problems. The first one is he never used that definition. Because in all of geometry, you will not find a shape. You will not find a figure, as I discussed in the last couple of weeks. What you will find is itineraries. You'll find lines made of locations. Those are itineraries. And all of geometry is measurement. It's a dynamic discipline. It's not a static discipline where you have the figures, the geometric figures there. And so the problem is that the figure belongs to physics. And the ridiculous nonsense that the mathematicians do has to do with itineraries. So they're describing itineraries because they deal with measurements, they deal with units, and so we can't merge those two. You can't merge the itineraries with the figures. These are two different things. Physics deals with the figures, and math deals with itineraries. Okay, and I have that statement. The reason atheists, theists, and agnostics have debated in circles about the existence of God for hundreds of years is that they never defined the word exist. So I'm the owner of the word object. I'm the owner of the word exist. Once you invent the wheel, once you invent fire, you can't have another person reinvent it. It's just as simple as that. And so this guy just copied pasted and says, oh, I'll call it mine. Okay? He didn't give me credit. He gives credit to all these other people who are mathematical physicists. Doesn't even mention me in his site. Okay. So I go and look at his atom, his magnetism, his electricity, his light, see what he's going to talk about. I mean, what is he going to put on his site? Well, I found a lot of stuff that seemed very familiar to me. Okay, here's the first one. He puts this atom in there, and he's got these little wires. He calls them fibers, tails, filaments. He uses words like that. He does not use the word thread. He does not use the word rope. Okay, and but that's what he's going to illustrate, and he's going to call it something else because he says, well, you look at a rope, and it's got these links. Okay, each one of those red and blue sets, we call them links of a rope. But when you have a chain, well, the links are, they're separated. Each link is a separate issue, a separate entity. And so he thinks he invented something because he put a chain instead of a rope. So he says, I got something different than you, Bill. I don't have a rope, I have chain. Okay? And that's more or less what the problem's going to be here. The issue's not what he's going to do, what he's going to use his chain or the rope with. The issue is the mechanism. Okay? The issue is going to be the mechanism. So this fellow puts all these little lines there, and you wonder what all these little tails and filaments and fibers that he mentions there are. And you'll never find them. He doesn't really give you an idea what those are. But he does in, well, first let me put this up here, which is just so that you can compare it against mine. Okay, that's my atom. Okay, and that was made by a fellow by the name of Dave, and I gave him full credit in my book, which is downloadable for free, okay, known as the rope hypothesis. And that's the 2D version. Another fellow known by the name of Dan. I won't give their names. You can find them in the book, okay. And he made this 3D version. I gave them both credit, okay, total credit, and I really do thank them for it. Okay, and so the question is, what are those lines that this fellow is putting up there? What are those little lines? See, I'm looking at the proton, what his proton looks like, and mine you can see are the convergence of threads. It's a star, and his looks like a little mess there, that little tangle that it's very hard to understand. This is not his picture. This is a picture I got from somewhere else because of legal issues that are underway, and so I didn't want to put his model there exactly for different reasons. Anyways, the issue here is that he doesn't define he doesn't identify what these little threads are, what his proton looks like, what a neutron looks like. Maybe he will in the future if he gets a chance. We'll find out about that. But so here is what he puts for the mediator of light. Okay, and so what is light speed? Why is light speed limited? Okay, and of course he's going to use my notion of the fact that the more links you have, the shorter each link, that sort of thing. Says the photon is merely a wave of deformation of some existing structure that spans the distance between the emitting and receiving atoms. Sounds a lot like my rope model. You have two atoms and a rope in between. Okay, what is the structure, the shape of the mediator of light and gravity? Yeah, what is the mediator of light and gravity? Hopefully it's a physical entity. Okay, whatever it is a physical entity. And there's only two possibilities in the universe. One is you send discrete particles or a wave made of particles one way, which is what everybody's done in the last 10,000 years, everyone. And then you have what bgaede came up with, and that's interconnectedness. And there's no in between. There's no gray. You don't have maybe here. It's one or the other. You either do it with discrete particles and you shoot them out and do push, and maybe do pull through pressure, that sort of thing. Casimir type effects, and or you do pull with an elongated entity, a mediator. And that's where the problem's going to be, because this guy's going to copy the mechanism, which is, you know, some physical object interconnecting two atoms. That's where the plagiarism comes into play. Seems absolutely necessary to explain light and gravity in terms of deformable what? Mediating material between the terminal atoms. Now, who came up with that? Did he come up with that? Material between the terminals of atoms? And it turns out that, you know, that he says that an object is that which has shape. But this is what this fellow comes up with next. He says that light is not an object. And this is what he proposes, I guess, these little links, I guess. I don't know what you call them. I guess I'll call them links for lack of a better word. But he says the fabric of existence clearly has the shape of atoms and the innumerous interconnection between them. Interconnections? Where did he get interconnections? That there's a physical entity interconnecting atoms. Where did he get this notion? Mechanism by which it deforms. Rearrangement of hook loop subunits. Okay, so he created those links. He thinks that's different. Okay, it is a little different, yeah, for sure. I'm not going to take credit for that, for sure. Light isn't an object, he says. Light isn't an object. What is he showing there? It looks like, you know, he's going to say that these links are physical things that unite two atoms, but he says it's not an object. Okay, that's kind of strange, kind of inconsistent, right? It is a torsional perturbance of the fabric of existence. Fabric of existence. What in the world is he talking about? What physical object is this fabric of existence? Oh, it's true. He said it's not an object. Okay, my mistake. So here we have two atoms. They're bound to each other. He's going to explain gravity and magnetism and light with this. He says they're bound, but they're not bound. Or they're bound by what? By a concept known as the fabric of existence. Fabric of existence. It says this fabric is an elastic web that is comprised of hook loop fibrous atoms and their interconnections. Okay, so what is he talking about? Maybe he's talking about this. Maybe this is what he's referring to. We have Brian Greene. He talks about the fabric of the cosmos. And Einstein talks about the fabric of space-time. Is that what the fabric that he's talking about? And you look it up, it says fabric and cloth and material are synonyms of textile. A textile is any material made of the interlacing fibers. A fabric is a material made through weaving, knitting, spreading, felting, stitching, crocheting, and bonding. Okay, so what material is this that he's talking about, this fabric of existence? Is it, what is it, yarn? What are we talking about here? What is that fabric? I had that talk with what's his name? JF, Garipi, Canadian fellow who runs his site in YouTube. And they had this mathematical physicist come in there. And I asked him what's between the electron and the proton in a hydrogen atom. And he said, it's the fabric. The fabric. That's, and like this guy says, it's like saying, what is this stuff? Well, it's the furniture of existence. What do you mean the furniture of existence? I mean, you're talking about a chair? You're talking about, what kind of furniture are you talking about? And this is more or less the same thing. He's saying the fabric. What fabric? I mean, nylon. What fabric are you talking about? What is this fabric? And of course, fabric of existence is a concept, and he's going to be pulling two atoms together and doing stuff with fabrics. Okay, so on the one hand, he takes my mechanism, which is the issue. What's at issue here? Takes my mechanism, and which is interconnectedness, and he puts his own stuff. Says, well, but I do it differently. I do it with little links. I don't care how you do it. Interconnectedness belongs to me. Okay, I came up with interconnectedness. Sorry, you can't invent the wheel. You can't invent fire again. You can't say yours is green fire. Okay, fire is fire. Okay, and so we either have interconnectedness or we have what mathematical physicists have been proposing for 10,000 years now, which is particles, discrete particles, pushing. So you can't have both. It's one or the other, and there's no intermediate. But if you can come up with an intermediate that does not involve pulling through some physical mediator, hey, then I'd like to see it, because I don't know what you could have come up with. Okay, so this is the issue. The issue is mechanism here. That's what he's borrowing without authorization. It turns out that he changes the wording. He doesn't call it pumping. he calls it, what was it, breathing. He says the atoms are breathing. And by breathing, obviously they're going to torque the rope because you're going to talk about torsion. Okay? So, yeah, it's quite my what is it? My model for mechanisms, okay, which was the important part. And here is what he's showing for more or less. Okay, this is my model, but this is what he's going to show for electricity. He's saying it's torsion of merged electron shells. Where did he get merged electron shells if the standard model just mentions that in passing, like saying, well, yeah, the shells, but the shells are just orbitals, and the orbitals are just regions where you can find the electron bead. And this guy turns them into physical objects, which is where he got that from me. He says they're membranes. He's going to merge these membranes, and then he's going to twirl them around like I did there and say that electricity is the torsion of all these merged shells. Okay? So again, he borrowed that, I guess, from my site, okay? Or from Facebook, you know, the Rational Science, Rational Scientific Method site. Okay, and so how does he do attraction, magnetic attraction? Well, he does it this way, which is, you know, you have all these threads moving around. If they move in the same direction, well, they interlock and they pull the two wires together. And that's essentially what he's explaining, except that he's going to say, well, I do it with these little wires or whatever he's got there that he puts in by hand. You know, we don't know what these wires are, what this fabric of existence that's twirling around is. He says that the electron shells are fuzzy and they extend to infinity. You know, a bunch of nonsense, but the mechanism is the issue. The issue is that when you have this mechanism, it goes like that. That produces pull, and that's what he's copied. And what does he do for repulsion? Well, he does this. Puts this up there, essentially. Okay, this is the repulsion. If you have one going clockwise, the other one going counterclockwise, the threads, they push each other away. And that's my mechanism, which is the important part. And he does it with these little wires, these little, I don't know what they are. For lack of a better word, I'll call them, fabric of existence. He's got the fabric of existence twirling around, you know, all over the place. But he says they're objects, which they aren't objects. You know, they're objects, but they're not objects. You know, light is mediated, not mediated by an object, he says. It just pulls two atoms together by concepts, I guess. So here's the only two possibilities, okay? You either do Mathphyz, discrete particles, or you do the rope model, interconnected atoms. That's it. There's no third possibility. And this fellow, apparently he studied physics or biology at the University of Columbia. Supposedly he got a PhD, even though he doesn't seem to be able to know how to reference. You know, you would think that a guy who studied physics would, at that level, at the PhD level, would at least know how to reference things, you know, give proper credit. He doesn't do that. He just completely bypassed the references. And he does, if he studied, you know, either physics or biology, well, he should have learned that model there. In fact, he taught physics at the high school level. And so he should have taught the mathematical physics, the discrete particles version. So where did he get the rope model, the one where we have interconnectedness? Whether he does it with little links or little fabrics of existences or whatever, it doesn't matter. But he's talking about interconnectedness. That's where he commits his plagiarism, especially when he doesn't give any credit whatsoever. Okay, and so one fellow put the real reason that this Demystifying Science group is up there, and it's for this. He says, he made a comment, said, I think the Demystifying Science audience are more concerned about trying to acquire your credit card details. Yeah, totally in agreement. This guy's not into science, he's into business. Okay, it's not like me. I have a passion for physics. I have a tremendous passion for these things. You know, I don't do things for money. And that's the difference between me and so many other people out there. You would say, well, Bill, don't you have a Patreon page? Yeah, the Patreon page, you know, first of all, I don't think I could live 2 days with what I get from Patreon, you know. Patreon page, I put it up there, so it's a token. It's a token of your appreciation to keep the program alive. That's all it's for. I wanted to leave it to, you know, to 10 cents, but Patreon wouldn't allow me. You know, they said the minimum is $1. So that's what I put up there. And it's interesting that when I created my Patreon page, one of the things that you got to answer is, when do you think you reached your goal? You know, some people say, well, I want to make $1,000 per month, 2,000, 3,000, whatever, you know. And I put it there immediately. I said, I've already reached my goal. One person gave me $1, and that was my goal. as long as I have $1, I'm going to keep the program running. And I have generous people there who give a little more than $1, and I thank them. And again, it's all just appreciation, it's just to keep the program running so that we have a discussion in physics, not in money. These folks, Nasty and Shilo, you know, they're into money. They're into something else. They're living off of this. Okay, so this is a little different. Okay, and yeah, a lot of people fall for it because they see some of this flashy stuff and they say, "Oh, I like that." They don't even know what they're staring at. They don't know what questions to ask, and that's what this channel is for. Here we get to the bottom of things. Believe me, and we don't skirt questions. You can put whatever questions you want in my site. You can cuss my mother if you want. I don't care. You want to come here? We'll discuss physics. That's what this site is for. And I have a passion for physics, just like one time I had a passion for communism, and that passion faded away. And I had a passion for atheism, and that faded away as well. But I don't think this one's going to fade away. I think I'm going to die with a rope model, and I have a passion for physics. So this site is not about making money. This site is about physics, about real science. And if you don't like my theory, fine. Come and debate me, fight me, insult me, love it. Okay? That's what this site is about. These people are into something else. They're creating a corporation or a sole proprietorship, whatever. Okay? So it turns out that this fellow, or lady, I don't know, one of the two, I guess it's a fellow, went in there and made some changes to his site today, or yesterday night, I don't know. And he put these changes to some of his pages, okay? Because I wrote him a letter and I said, I think you got some stuff that belongs to me on your site. And he answers, no, I don't. But if you can find something that in the literature out there that I published that belongs to you, or I guess in his site, he would gladly correct it. And he went in there and corrected these on his own, okay? Well, unfortunately, it's a little too late. Okay? He's been running with this for 2.5 years, I think, or 3 years, behind my back, putting his stuff in his site, creating his little empire there. And he changed the names of things. He could have called them threads, he could have called them ropes, whatever. No credit. He never used those words. He changed the same concept. He just called them wires. What was it? The fabric of existence. You know, he gave them all these fancy names. And again, not knowing the difference between an object and a concept. But even worse, he put these like saying, "Oh, I fixed the problem. See, I put your name in there, in my site, in at least 4 of these sites." Well, the problem here is he doesn't know how to give credit. He doesn't know. I mean, supposedly he's a PhD, right? And you would think that a guy like that would at least have learned the basics of how to give proper credit. And he doesn't. He dilutes it. He says, look, I give credit to all these people, and my mother and my grandfather and my great-granddaddy who fought at Shilo, okay? And, you know, he puts a whole bunch of people in there like, I owe it to all of these people. No. The word object belongs to me. The word exist belongs to me. I was the one who defined those. And the rope model, interconnectedness, in other words, belongs to me. And pull belongs to me because there is no pull in mathematical physics. Just like the theory of extinction, mass extinction in the past belongs to me. The overturning of the population pyramid belongs to me. Okay, I have a lot of stuff that belongs to me because I put them in a book, which I published in 1998. This is the second version of it. It came out in the year 2000. Okay, and I have, this is my registration for it. Let's see if I can put it here, okay. Certificate of registration, okay, that it's registered in the United States, okay. And I changed that color to black because I became a racist against white people, you know. And so I changed it from white to black, and so now the cover is black. But, and that's the 4th edition there, that's the one that's out there now, and that's been out there since the year 2008. So I've had this stuff on, you know, out there for a long time now, 20 years. Okay? It's been out there. And so what's the issue? The issue is he gives credit to a whole bunch of people, like saying, well, I put you in there with this whole group. And he mentions Mathphyz, who was one of the first people to buy my book. Fortunately, he's no longer around these days. And Mathphyz, you know, he took some of my stuff and put it in Hub Pages. Hub Pages is a site also where you can, you know, put things in there, you know, write things. And Mathphyz, he went in there, he asked me for some of the stuff because he had a debate with some atheist out there. I don't really know the details. And so he used a lot of my material. He used especially the word life. You know, I'm going to get to that in a second. And so, he mentioned Mathphyz, like, I got this from all these other sources. Well, Mathphyz is not a formal source. Mathphyz did not write when he was alive. He did not write. He didn't publish anything. So it's like an informal source. And again, he got it all from me. He got it from Why God Doesn't Exist, from my book. That's how Mathphyz got it. I mean, again, he's one of the first guys who buy my book. And so I thank him for that too. Okay, so he diluted it. And then he says, well, but this is not bgaede's real model. Again, too little, too late. First of all, he blindsided me for 2 years or so. And then he comes at the last moment and says, oh, by the way, yeah, bgaede gave me some ideas about this. No, he took the mechanisms outright. You either have push or you have pull. And what mathematical physics doesn't have is pull, because you need a physical mediator, and that's what he took away. He took this and claimed it as his. Claimed it as his because he didn't give me credit for 2.5 years until I discovered him. Now he said, oh, by the way, Bill, see, I gave you credit. Poor Bill, I mean, he doesn't know anything about tort law, obviously. I recommend that he check real quick with a lawyer. Consult him, and learn a little bit about tort law. Anyways, what is interesting, this fellow Shilo and this lady Nasty, they put in one of their videos, they say, please share your ideas on how to improve the model further. Okay, so I went in there to try to share some ideas, with them. In fact, I wasn't the only one. Apparently there was another fellow. And this fellow went in there and he put a comment. A couple comments, in fact. He put in there a comment. He says, you copy bgaede's model, which I've shown has several limitations and is irrational. You copied bgaede's irrational rope model. I guess very easy to see that he did. Light is thus imagined as a discrete torsional deformation of the thin elastic tails, that's what he calls them, of atomic E-shells, in that each photon is a singular event with a specific strength or energy. He says, really? You copy bgaede's ropehypothesis.com. Have you thought how long this tail is to reach us from the furthest reaches? And la 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 la. He goes on. And so I put a note there myself, and I said, thank you, Paul. I don't know who he is. Says, whether you believe or not in the rope model or think that it is irrational, that part of your argument is immaterial to the instant context. Like everyone else, you recognize that what's in this site was plagiarized from the rope hypothesis, beginning with the definitions of object exist et al. But be aware that Micky and Quinn, that's Shilo and Nasty there, delete comments as well. And that's exactly what I predicted. In fact, they've been deleting comments not only in their site, but in YouTube. And so they're asking for contributions to please help us, with suggestions on how we can improve the model. Well, we're trying to get in contact with them, but they're deleting the comments. And I predicted that that's exactly what he would do. That's why I put the comments. I put the comments because I want to see if he erases them. And he did. Yeah, he's one of these people who hides, which another, not only did he try to hide the model that he invented, for 2.5 years until finally giving me credit. And you wonder, I mean, if that's not his material, why is he giving me credit? Why did he decide on April 11 or maybe April 10 to give me credit if I don't deserve the credit? If he's saying, well, yeah, bgaede gave me some ideas there, yeah. I mean, he shouldn't give me credit if it's not mine, right? He should not say, give me credit at all. And if he's going to give me credit, he better give me credit in the right way and not the way he did it. Well, like saying, well, I got all these ideas from Faraday and my grandmother and, that's not the way to give credit. So it's too little too late. He's been hiding all this stuff and trying to build a business with it. That's what he's all about, him and his lady friend there. What do they call him? They call him these days partners. My partner, they say. Incidentally, you know how you know if you're married? Because I define that as well. No one has ever defined the word marriage except me. So listen carefully before these two fellows steal that from me as well. How do you know you're married? Okay, and I have a little experience. I've been married 45 years with the same woman. Love her, she's great. And how do you know if you're married? Is it because you love her, like I love my wife? Is it because you have a certificate that says I went before the judge and swore that, forever and ever? No. So listen carefully. I'm going to give you the definition of marriage. Okay, you heard it here. For the first, marriage is equal to one bank account. That's the definition of marriage. One bank account. If the two of you, whether it's this diversity thing of today, or it's he and she and him, are married or not is determined by whether you have one bank account. if you have 2 bank accounts, I don't care what the certificate says, I don't care what the judge says, you're not married. And I'll let you do as homework, figure out why that's the case. Okay, so I've been married 45 years. We've had 1 bank account. Okay, so that's the definition of marriage. Okay, what do I have here? Oh yeah, here's a summary then of what the problem is, okay, of what these people, why these people are at fault. They blindsided me for 2.5 years, 2 years at least, about using my material. Okay, I had no idea these people were doing this behind my back. I just found out because of this thread that this fellow happened to put in this site, and this fellow, his name is Micky Callahan, that's his moniker. He comes in and he says, "Oh, it was put in here by mistake." No kidding. What an error. It's like you steal from the bank and you put it in the bank, and they say, "Hey, all these bills are marked." Oh, I wasn't supposed to put it in the bank. My wife made that error. Yeah. Okay, they deliberately changed the language. They don't use the word thread and rope so they wouldn't be detected. They use these other words. Okay, so, you know, I never picked up on that. Nowhere on the this Demystifying Science site is my name referenced, despite that there were many references to other individuals. Okay, they just put the references today or yesterday night, I don't know. And why did they put my name in there if I don't deserve the credit? If I deserve the credit, why put me in there with Faraday and with all these, and Mathphyz and his grandmother and who knows what, who else? I mean, you know, is that the way to give credit? Say, I got it from all these people. I got it through my upbringing, through my professor, and I owe my, what's he giving, a speech on why he got a Nobel Prize? What is this? And outright plagiarized the relevant mechanisms. That's what he plagiarized. And these are just some of them. I only included 4 in here. He merged the electron shells that spin in situ to produce electricity. Okay, what I call my serpentines. The parallel live wires attract and repel due to physical mediators extending from atoms. I call them threads. He diluted that and gave them a different name. Light consists of a torsion of a DNA-like rope-like mediator. Well, it's a mediator. It's a physical mediator. And that's what he's putting in there, but he's saying, well, it's the fabric of existence that's in there. So again, he doesn't understand the word object. Why? Because he copied and pasted whatever he saw there. He said, oh, this sounds nice, and he put it in there. He doesn't understand the word object to this day. He doesn't know the difference between an object and a concept. And then obviously he's going to use that not only for gravity, but he's got the equation of a rope essentially there. He put that 1 over lambda. Okay. Let's see if I think it's this one. Okay, so these are the things that belong to me. Okay, this is out of Why God Doesn't Exist. Okay, book. The book there. There we go. Why God Doesn't Exist. Okay, that's the book, and 500-page book. Broke my head on that one. And it was. It ended up being 500 pages. Originally, it was 2,500 pages, 5 times as big. I had to cut so much stuff in there because I write a lot, read a lot, do a lot of research. Anyways, no one in the last 10,000 years has defined the word object. That's my #1 thing I'm proud of. I defined the word object. That word belongs to me and no one else. Okay, or realize that physics demands an object. You're going to give a physical interpretation, which is what science is about, which is what physics is about. You're going to give an explanation of a mechanism. You need objects. Sorry. And no one ever figured that out. Never even realized it, that you have all these intangible, invisible objects out there that you cannot touch or see that are mediating all the transactions that Mother Nature runs daily. No one ever defined the word exist. That's why atheists, theists, and agnostics go around in circles. And I used to be an atheist, so, you know, I kind of slapped myself. I didn't figure this out until later. That atheism is the religion of mathematics. All these mathematicians, they say, oh, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. You know, you're not going to believe in God in the 21st century. No, I believe in space-time, and I believe in Big Bang and creationism, and I believe in all this nonsense that was shoved down my throat in my quest for my PhD. That's what they believe in. So they come up with all this nonsense. Why? Because they don't follow the correct scientific method. And what fails with atheism is the scientific method. In science, in physics, we do not say, I believe in God. In science, we do not say, I don't believe in God. In science, we do not say, I don't know if God exists or not. I think I'm going to run an experiment to find out if God exists or not. And still, I always doubted whether God exists or not. No, none of that belongs to science. In science, we say, let us assume that God exists. because God can only be an assumption, a hypothesis. And a hypothesis is not a theory. Hypotheses are the objects and the definitions you present at the beginning of your theory. Then you can explain what God did. You can say, this is how he created the universe. Fine, you can talk about anything you want. But first you got to present God. And you don't say, I believe in God. You say, let us assume God exists. And for sure you don't say, like some of these people who insist that observation is part of the scientific method, and say, I observed God. Oh, you observed God? Yeah, I saw the flower that was so beautiful and the bee running around, and I said, only God could have made that. Well, did you observe God? Or did you observe a bee? So that's the issue. What did you observe? So no, observation is not part of the scientific method. In science, we do not observe. Science, we sit back and try to visualize. What could Mother Nature be using in that invisible, intangible world that you cannot observe or touch? Okay, so that's the way it works. And so that's why a lot of these people don't understand why observation is not part of the scientific method. It's part of the religious method that all these other people do. Why? Because they do research. They don't do science, they do research. Research is not science. The fact that you did research and studied and did experiments doesn't mean you can explain. Okay, so no, the so-called scientific method we've had for the last 400 years is not a scientific method. It's a method of religion. It should not be confused for science at all. And that's why they ended up with all these irrational explanations. Anyways, no one ever proposed physical interconnectedness. That's mine. Sorry. Once you discover fire, no one can discover it again. Okay. No one proposed a rope-like mediator for light, a physical mediator. And no one discovered a mechanism of action at a distance, how to produce pull. You don't have pull in all of mathematical physics. And I don't know, this guy's going to talk about gravity, if he gets that far. And so how is he going to produce pull without a physical mediator? As soon as he puts a physical mediator, he's going to have to, give credit to bgaede. He's going to have to go to why God doesn't exist to get that information, to get, how, one atom pulls on another with the fabric of what? Of existence? No one ever discovered the overturning of the pyramid extinction mechanisms, the population pyramid overturn and the ecological pyramid overturn. No one discovered that humans will soon become extinct because our whole economic system will collapse very soon, in fact. One of the reasons I don't care about money, because, I'm not going to take it to my tomb. I don't want to be the richest guy in the cemetery. No one ever discovered the definition of life. Okay, that's here. That's in this book. Okay. And it's also in my other book, in the Neanderthal book. It's also there as well. I discussed that as well. Anyways, until Why God Doesn't Exist, which was published in 1998, okay, everyone did physics with one-way particles and one-way waves. For the first time, we have interconnectedness, physical interconnectedness. That means that you have a physical entity, that which has shape, but you cannot touch or see it, which is the wrong definition of the word object. And that's why it was important to define the word object. And then until 1998, until my book, everyone did physics by moving concepts around. And they still do. In fact, this fellow talks about what? The fabric of existence. As I love the fabric of existence. It's a way of eluding the question. This is what this mathematical physicist did. He went in there and said, ask him, what is between the electron and the proton? He says, a fabric. Fabric of what? What is a fabric? What the hell is a fabric? Yeah, that's what they do. They elude the question by putting these words. They think they answer the question. But here's the epilogue, okay? And refers mainly, I think, to his Frau, this nasty girl, okay? And she puts in her site, that Demystifying Science site, what is life? Okay, and says, well, she goes through all this rigmarole, mentioning a fellow known as Thomas Gold. And this is what she studies. I guess she follows or thinks that this guy knew something about something. And in the end, she says, what is life? We don't know what life is. We'll continue investigating for the next 2,000 years to find out what life is. Well, all I can tell her is she should go and visit Mathphyz Hub Page's site. And Mathphyz, he got that from Why God Doesn't Exist. And he tells you what the definition of life is. Here you have these PhDs. They're all biologists. They claim that they're biologists because they warmed the seat at the university for 10 or so years. And they say, oh, I'm a biologist. Oh, why are you a biologist? Well, because I got a PhD. Well, William Lane Craig, he's got a PhD in divinity studies. What kind of PhD is that? That's garbage. I clean my nose with that. He might think, oh, I'm a doctor. Doctor in what? Doctor in God? In the belief in God? Is that what his PhD is in? It's worthless garbage. And if you don't know what life is, and biology is the study of life, then you're not a biologist. I don't care how many years you warmed a seed in college. Okay, it's just as simple as that, straightforward. No runaround. And here, these people claim to be biologists, doctors, because they have a PhD, and they don't know what life is. They're still trying to find the definition of life. And they'll be looking for it forever because, I mean, we had biology, what, maybe 200 years now at least? Even more. I mean, you could go all the way to Robert Hooke, who did micrography in 1665. He looked through the microscope, started looking at these little things that were moving around in there. And so, you know, how many more years do you need to define the word life? And until you do, you're not a biologist. Because a biologist is the guy who studies life, and you don't know what you're studying. You know, so this is the issue. The issue, all these people, they have these PhDs, and they don't know what they're talking about, just like the mathematical physicists. They think they're talking about something, and they give you the most ridiculous explanation that they can find. They say a particle can be at two places at once. So why did the guy warm a seat for 10 years at a university to tell you the particle can be at two places at once? And then when you say, well, that sounds irrational. Well, yeah, that's not important. You're not supposed to take it literally. That's the kind of answer you get. And you wouldn't have that computer if quantum weren't right and that kind of thing, you know. Those are the answers you get. Yeah, and they run the world of science. So yeah, all I can ask Nasty there is for her to check, not to look at Tom Gold. He didn't know squat about anything, even about physics. I mean, he was supposedly a physicist. He went around with, what was his name? Fred Hoyle, who came up with the steady state theory. And they didn't know squat. He was just as dumb as all the other mathematical physicists out there. They were all, you know, cuckoo in the head because all they have is our irrational explanation. And this lady follows this guy and says, oh, Thomas Gold, you know, he came up with all these great ideas about temperature and who knows what. He's not a scientist. Not a scientist at all because he doesn't follow the scientific method. Okay? He doesn't know how to define words. And no mathematician out there has ever learned how to define words, or realize that you have to define words as the first step of the scientific method. That's where all these people fail.